For us women, we tend to identify more with the imposter syndrome, and we don't feel particularly qualified to do something until we've done it. But the deal is, you don't get to feel the confidence till after you do it. So it's a catch-22, so just do it.
Hey, VetFolio Voice family, so happy you're here. Dr. Stacy Santee joined me for this episode, which is sort of a follow-up to a very successful presentation she delivered earlier this year about how to, quote, stop acting like a girl. I have to admit, I did not know what to expect when I first heard that title, but after a short chat, Stacy did a great job of pointing out how, despite the fact that women make up a large majority of veterinary professionals, that's not necessarily reflected in the higher levels of leadership. So, of course, the million-dollar question that follows is, why aren't more women in leadership positions? Dr. Santee lists several common behaviors that women may exhibit and how these might affect our ability to move into leadership roles. And of course, beyond just naming them, she offers actionable steps on how changes, some subtle, some maybe not so subtle, can help put women in a better position to continue moving forward in our careers. This is a long one. There's a lot to talk about, so let me introduce Stacy and let's jump into it. Dr. Stacy Santee is a 1996 DVM graduate from Colorado State University and the founder of Vet2Pet, a technology communication platform for veterinary practices that was acquired by VetSource in 2022. With over 20 years of clinical experience in small animal emergency practice, Stacy brings an in-the-trenches approach to ideas and solutions for veterinary teams that focus on technology, workflows, and client service. She's served on various industry advisory boards, served as past president of the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association, and was voted 2021 Educator of the Year for Western Veterinary Conference. She lives in Durango, Colorado with 6 horses, 2 dogs, 1 cat, 4 chickens, 1 husband, and hopefully a baby burro someday. I love that. All right, let's go ahead and learn about how to stop acting like a girl.
Join more than 100,000 learners just like you. VetFolio is one of the largest providers of continuing education for the animal health community, offering more than 500 race-approved CE courses. Earn veterinary CE anytime, anywhere with VetFolio. Subscribe today at vetfolio.com.
Stacy, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with you, Cassie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so excited to dive into this. And I want to kind of start with your background a little bit. You're just a really good example of someone who's worked hard and achieved your goals. And I'm sure that was completely effortless and just came to you with like no problem whatsoever. Just kidding. I'm sure there was a lot of hard work that went into that. So can you tell us a little bit about, just your background, your journey, your career?
Yeah, it was a fun one for sure, and has a few left turns that were unexpected. So I graduated from CSU in 96 and joined the trench force being a frontline veterinarian and loved it. I did that for about 20 years. And along the way, I ended up stumbling on this idea that wouldn't it be cool if I could communicate with my clients through an app and send them notifications. And I looked around, Googled it, and nobody was doing it at all. This did not exist for veterinarians in 2010. So I decided to start trying to build it out. And I know nothing about technology. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew it would be amazing if I could send my clients a push notification every month, reminding them to give their pet their heartworm prevention. And one thing led to another, and I ended up starting my own company in 2013, and I ended up scaling that company and successfully exiting it to VetSource in 2022. So it was a wild ride for sure, and I learned a lot along the way, but it just goes to show you that you never know where your path might take you in life.
Absolutely. I think I've said this probably several times on the podcast before, where I remember in vet school, I felt like every single talk we had, the speaker would say, if you would have told me I would be doing this in 10 years, I never would have believed you. So of course, I'm sitting there going, what the heck am I going to be doing in 10 years? Like this is as universal as every single speaker says the same thing. And sure enough, if you would have told me 10 years ago that this is what I would be doing, then I would not have believed you. And that's part of the fun of our careers, right? Is just being able to say yes to opportunities and kind of seeing where they take us.
Yeah, for sure. So at that particular point in my life, it turns out I was getting pretty unhappy in my current job at the veterinary practice. I was the managing veterinarian. We had gotten acquired by a big corporate, and I just wasn't thriving. And I was trying to figure out what's wrong with me. What am I doing wrong? How can I make this last? And then this door opened. It opened right in front of my face. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to walk through that door and see where it takes me.
I love that. I love that. I think it's so important for us to remember that like sometimes you just have to walk through the door and you just have to see what's on the other side.
Yeah. And my parents, it's so funny when I told them, I'm going to go build this app thing. I'm going to start a technology company. And they're like, well, wait a minute. What about this job you have and all this education you have? And if we get this right, if we're understanding what you're saying, you're going to stop doing everything you know and go do something you completely have no idea. Like, yeah, that's the general idea.
Sounds good, right?
Sounds good.
Oh my gosh. And then it ended up being such a good thing. And, part of that journey has given you just a lot of insight into growth and leadership and concepts like that, to the point where I understand you gave a talk at Western Veterinary Conference this past year, very well attended, very well received. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Can you tell us about the talk, kind of the inspiration behind it, and just some of the details there?
So I did this talk called Stop Acting Like a Girl, Overcoming Traditional Girl Rules, that's in quotes, that are holding you back. And the origin of this talk was about 4 or 5 years ago. I got a whim, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, one morning to write down these 6 things that I had observed women doing that men don't do. And the reason I was able to get to that place is because when I started my vet career, as you know, it's mostly women, right? In the clinic. In my class, it was mostly women. When I got to work, it was mostly women. And that was my norm. And then when I became managing veterinarian at this clinic and I'm having to interact with the corporate mothership, it's mostly men. Okay, I can take that. But then fast forward, when I start my own company, I hire women, mostly women, because they actually were the ones that were qualified for the job. I didn't really think about it. But then when I started trying to get partnerships and distribution deals and investors, and then eventually selling it, I was dealing predominantly with men at the top level. So here I'm thinking, I work in an industry that's like at least 80% women on the ground, but when I go up to the top, it's like 80% men. What is going on here? And that's when I started sort of asking myself, what's the difference in our behaviors? And are there things that we as women could be doing that are actually holding us back? And I started paying close attention to those women that were in the leadership roles and started seeing differences in what they did versus what, say, other people did that weren't in the roles. And that was the origin of my topics.
I will show my hand a little here that I have some insight into what the topics are. And I love this discussion. Kind of when we discussed going into the podcast here, we said, we don't know how many we're going to make it through on this podcast because there's so much to say about each one, but let's do our best. Let's see how many we can make it through. Do you want to list out the 6 before we get started, and then we'll see how much detail we can jump into?
Sounds good. So the first one is, and these aren't in any particular order, but be decisive, make decisions and don't be a follower. The second one is know your numbers. You have to know the finances behind not only yourself, but your company. The third is to ask for what you want instead of hoping and wishing it gets bestowed upon you. And the fourth is, I call it let it go, and just stop building up stories and narratives in your head that are not founded or grounded on facts. And then the fifth one is share your opinions, like have your voice heard, be present and speak up. And then the sixth one is to stop over apologizing. I feel like apologizing is part of the vernacular of any girl, and we say it oftentimes without even knowing we're saying it. So these are things that I have observed that women tend to definitely do, and subconsciously sometimes, and men just don't.
Absolutely. I know I can relate to a few of those. I think we can all probably relate to each one a little differently. And the concept behind each point is going to look a little bit different to everyone, which I would imagine is why this topic is so well received, because it can apply to all of us, no matter what our role is, whether it's in the clinic or out of the clinic.
Totally. And when you think back to it, I mean, the reason I got to thinking about this is because I too was raised under traditional girl rules, like even things that, you're supposed to go with the flow and be chill and easygoing, and you're not supposed to be the dreaded labeled bossy girl. These kinds of things that happen when you're very young and you're developing your social skills and the way you operate in the world. I think some of this carries on with us, and we have to break those rules and kind of at least know we're doing them and think about if it's working for us in our current role.
I think that last point is a really good one. Like, see, is this working for me with what I'm doing? And if not, then here's some opportunities to change it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's jump in. Okay, can we start with being decisive and being able to make a decision?
What I found is that maybe it's part of that go with the flow thing, but we are often raised or brought up to just make only, not make all the decisions we can make. And what I mean by that is when we make decisions, it sometimes seems like maybe we feel we aren't qualified, maybe we aren't the one that should be making this final decision, and we avoid doing it. Therefore, we kind of stay out of the limelight, so to speak. And it could be something as simple as, you're going to get pizza for the office. And you're like, hey, what kind of pizza do you guys want? And almost every girl I know will say, I don't care, whatever you want, I'm easy. And that is just not true. Like, you do care what kind of pizza I order.
I don't want anchovies on my pizza.
Yeah, most everyone hates Hawaiian pizza.
Oh man, I like Hawaiian pizza.
You like it.
I do. I know.
So it's better if you can just say something like, I like pepperoni and black olives on thin crust. Do you like that one? Like sharing, what you want and making decisions puts you in the room and sets you up as being a leader, someone that's going to give the feedback, someone that's going to be able to handle a situation when you have to make a decision.
That makes a lot of sense. Just, I think I can relate to that on a lot of levels, both personally and having given that answer verbatim, like, oh, whatever everybody else wants, I'm easy. I've said those words multiple times. It also makes me think of, I have two daughters and the lessons that I'm teaching them and how that might influence their ability to grow in leadership in the future and being conscientious of that. And I agree. I think, we are kind of taught that it's a positive thing to be able to go with the flow, and it probably is to a degree. But I mean, something like a pizza order, then like what? Absolutely, like, give your opinion. What's it gonna hurt to say this is what I like on my pizza? And
and when it comes to making decisions, I think a lot of us get paralyzed because we don't want to make a bad or a wrong decision. And let's just be clear, like, there really aren't bad decisions in life. There are just decisions that didn't result in the outcome you're going for. And if you show me anyone that's successful, I'm going to show you someone that has made a lot of bad or wrong decisions. And that's just part of how we learn and move forward. But when you are trying to make a decision, like it could be something as ordering pizza, but it could be something bigger, like, should I quit my job and do something different? There are a few things to think about. One is, I like to list my priorities and what regarding this decision, like what is meaningful to me here? What do I want? The next one is you want to gather some information. So like, how long is this going to take? How much work am I going to have to put forward to get what I want? How expensive is this going to cost? So things like this will help frame it for you. And then what you want to do is you want to lay out and think about the best case scenario. Like, you would be shocked at how many people don't think about what success looks like. You don't really picture yourself there doing the thing, being the vice president, owning the practice, whatever it is. And you got to think about it, because do you really want it? Is that the life you want? And then you need to play out the worst case scenario, like what could go wrong here? Not to be a Debbie Downer, but just to make sure that you see the whole picture. And then I say, consult with a few people. So, trusted advisors, seek their input. But the most important thing you can do is consult with yourself. And I think a lot of us don't do this enough. And, there's a little voice inside each and every one of us that has your best interest at heart always. And it's your life, man. If you aren't, no one's going to care about it more than you. So when it comes to this stuff, like, find that voice. And it's so quiet, like it's a whisper, right? It doesn't yell, it doesn't scream, it doesn't talk over anybody. So in order to hear it, sometimes you have to sort of go to a place where you can find it. And that might be going on a long nature walk, checking yourself into a hotel without TikTok for a weekend, or where I used to go to the laundromat, Cassie. I would sit at the laundromat, do laundry, and that humming of the machine, I would just like think. Use that time to think. Now I can't afford a washer and dryer, but back then, like that was my thinking place. And then lastly, like, just do it, right? Just make a decision. Don't get stalled out. Don't overthink it. Don't wonder about what would have happened if. You've done the homework. It's go time.
I love that, because that's such a quick way to just stay stuck in whatever place you are, is to overanalyze it and, try to go over and account for every single possibility. At some point, you just need to make a decision. And I love what you said about imagining the best and the worst case scenario, because I think it's important, like you said, imagine the best case scenario. If it plays out exactly how you see it, that may be the picture of what you've been told or you feel like success looks like. But is that what you want? Is that what's important? And if it is, then by all means. And so many times if we play out that worst case scenario, if we really like draw it out and we're like, this is what happened, this is terrible, it's usually not as bad as we think.
Yeah. And don't worry, you can always make another decision. No one's going to stop you. It's your life. So you can make as many decisions as you want. And I think where I see people really struggle with this is they just won't make a decision, which technically is in fact a decision. So.
Right. Yeah. And you just end up stuck because, nothing moves forward, nothing moves backward. You're just stuck because you're not, like you said, you're making a decision not to move forward, not to do something different.
Yeah. And I saw this thing recently. It might have been on TikTok actually. And it was a thing on hypothetical regret. And it was basically saying like this professor, she said she counseled students and they were like, should I go to Harvard? Should I go to Yale? They didn't know which one. And she said, well, maybe you pick Harvard and you go, like I never had these choices, but maybe someone
Me neither.
You pick Harvard and you go and it's horrible. Just imagine your first year is horrible and you say, man, I really screwed up. I should have gone to Yale. Do you know what that would have looked like? I mean, you have no idea. It could have been way worse. So once you make a decision, it's just like such a waste of energy to look back because you have no idea what it could have been.
That's such a good point. And I thank you for saying that because I feel like there's so many of us out there, myself included, who know that and, know that we can move forward. And if this decision doesn't work out, oftentimes we can make another one and everything will be okay. I know I've certainly counseled people on that when they've asked my opinion. I said, just do it. What's the worst? It's 1 year. It'll be okay. It's, whatever the scenario is, usually it's 1 year and it'll be fine. If you don't like it, do something different. But to actually like take that advice ourselves, I think you're also giving us a good reminder to listen to ourselves and to have that quiet time of reflection, which can be so hard to come across just at it, different chapters in our lives, but certainly with our phones and social media. It's so easy to distract ourselves. It's so easy to reach for that easy dopamine hit. It's much harder to sit quietly and kind of listen to that quiet voice and think. So thank you for the reminder of just how important that really is. The next one I'm really curious about is know your number. And you touched on this a little bit when we chatted before, and I thought this was really interesting and probably something we don't think about often enough.
No, for sure. So when I started my company, Vet to Pet, and I was early in the days of it, I was at breakfast one day with one of my partners in my company. It's a person I partnered with to help me get some knowledge. He knew how to integrate with the practice software. Like I had no idea how to do that. So we became, for all intents and purposes, business partners. And we were hanging out, having breakfast, and he's like, "So, what's your number?" And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "What's your number?" I literally had no idea what he was talking about. And he said, "Well, everyone has their number." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, how much money do you need to live out your life?" And I'm like, "Well, I have no idea." And it dawned on me right then that, like, why didn't I have an idea for that? That does seem like a very important number. I should probably know. And I find that a lot of women don't think like this, but men tend to think like this. And so he made me do my homework, which was, how old do I think I'll live? What kind of lifestyle do I want? What debts do I want to have paid off? Do I want to own my own home? Do I need to put any kids through college? Do I want to travel the world, or do I want to just have my garden and live in peace? Whatever I want. So he said, "It's your life. You define it. So how much is your vision going to cost you? You need to know this, because someday someone's going to ask to buy your company and you need to know how much to sell it for." And while I had a company to sell eventually, that doesn't change it for anybody else out there who is doing the daily grind. Like, what are you doing it all for? And what's the end game? And what's your number? Because if you have a number, you can know where you're headed. You can make decisions that get you hopefully closer to that outcome than just if you're, sailing blindly through the world and you don't know this. Like, you just get what you get at the end. Hopefully it's great. Maybe it's not, but you weren't really managing it.
I think it almost ties back to that first one of like not making a decision and like going with the flow, and with a company to say, I just have this company, this, little old company. But if you don't put in the work and you don't have that vision and you don't understand what that can mean for your life in the long run, whatever that may be, then yeah, like you said, you get what you get. And so not going with the flow in that regard, really understanding what the end goal might look like and what you want, and the money behind that.
Mm-hmm. Even if you have a job that pays $20 an hour, I mean, you still have a life to live. It's your life. You can still carve out your destiny and your path. And if you want to make more money, you got to go figure out how to do it. If your dream is bigger than that, then you've got to go chase down how to get there. If your current salary is going to get you to your dream state at the end, great. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. But just not knowing is sort of like not a great option. And a lot of us women operate that way. The other thing we do is we don't really manage our finances. And I say this from managing lots of women and from being one myself. How do 401ks work? How does the stock market work? How do real estate investments work? What is the deal with these bonds? How do they work? Like all this stuff to help your money make more money for you. You probably maybe don't know how it works. And to be honest, it's like super boring. Why would you want to waste your time on that? But it's probably one of the most important things you could learn. So you can start to go. I find when you know more, you're able to hold yourself in higher regard and goes back to making better decisions for yourself and get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that at least my impression. I don't know if this is true, but my impression is that conversations around money are becoming more commonplace. And that's a pet peeve of mine, is obviously like situational dependent. There's times where, you have to use discretion, but just the conversation about how much does this job pay and how the economics of it work and everything like that. How much does this person make versus that person? That becoming a much more open discussion. So we're not seeing, as many pay discrepancies and things like that. Hopefully, I don't know. But it feels to me that conversation is becoming a little more comfortable, a little more commonplace, hopefully for men and for women. But, I think that's helping in general. And again, that's just my impression.
Well, if you want to know what your job is worth, don't go ask all the other ladies, go ask the men doing the same job. And that's where you find out what you should be getting paid. That's number one. But the other thing too is you might not know this stuff. There's a very good chance you do not know this stuff. That would be normal because women only got to start using the credit cards in the 80s.
Oh my gosh.
We're very new users to this. So we have to figure out, how to adopt it quickly, own it, and be in charge of it. The other thing too is no matter where you work, like if you're in a smaller team in a department or you're maybe mid management or upper level, it's always a good idea to know the numbers of your organization. Like, what's our revenue? What do we want the revenue to be? What are our expenses? How is our profitability around this place? I think when you start asking questions like that in your job place, people start taking you more serious.
Yes. And I think it's important for organizations to be open with that type of information with employees because, especially in the veterinary industry, we know veterinary care is expensive and it can be a challenge for pet owners. And, thinking from whatever your role is, whether, you're a CSR giving an estimate over the phone or a technician who has to go over a treatment plan, or maybe, a doctor who's going in and going over their own treatment plan, you're having discussions that can get uncomfortable with pet owners. And sometimes pet owners can be understanding. Sometimes they can be very hostile over it. But understanding the economics behind why the prices are what they are and what you're recommending, and the fact that if you're going to work, you also need to make sure you're taking home a paycheck. It can be a hard conversation no matter how you cut it, but it can at least give you that solidarity, that confidence to say, for hopefully these prices aren't just set willy-nilly, they're set for a reason, and here's how the economics of whatever organization I'm working for play into this price setting.
Yeah, totally. You have to know that stuff so you can speak with confidence. And when you have more confidence, you have more knowledge, you get more confidence, you get less imposter syndrome. That's kind of how it works.
Oh gosh,
so
does that ever go away?
No, the thing about imposter syndrome, it's tied so closely to confidence to do something. But the deal is you don't get the confidence till after you do the thing. So everyone has imposter syndrome. There was even this study that was done where there was a job posted on LinkedIn and it required 5 years of experience. And women wouldn't apply for the job if they had 4 years of experience because they didn't meet the 5 years. But men would apply if they had 1 year. This was the discovery. And so it comes back to women I think we find men that do this too, but I think for us women, we tend to identify more with the imposter syndrome and we don't feel particularly qualified to do something until we've done it. But the deal is you don't get to feel the confidence till after you do it. So it's a catch-22. So just do it. That's what I
Absolutely.
say.
I think you kind of alluded to that knowledge is power. So even if, you're still kind of in the process of doing the things, learning how the things work, learning how a 401k works and why it's important and how the stock market works and how to save money effectively and do all these things, even just knowing, even if you're still in the process of actually implementing, can help build that confidence and, like you said, reduce that imposter syndrome.
And there's lots of resources. Maybe at the end, we'll be able to share some resources for people on the website.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that sounds great because I don't think we're going to make it through all 6 here, but I kind of love that. I'm kind of glad because it means we're getting to spend some time on each one. I wanted to touch on, when we're talking about know your number, if it is time to go ask for a raise or something along those lines, because I know you have some thoughts on the approach when we're doing something like that.
Oh, yeah. I have a 5-step no-fail strategy on how to get a raise. So this has been used on me successfully when I was the boss. So I know it works. Now, the first thing you have to do if you want to get a raise is you have to know what you're worth. And how do you know what you're worth? Well, here's the easy way. If you don't show up for work tomorrow, how jacked is your company going to be? So if you miss a day of work because you're sick, or God forbid, 2 or 3 days or a week, is the place like okay? Or are they dying? Like they can't function without you? That's kind of where you get to decide how much you're worth. It's not your age. It's not how much experience you have. It's not your seniority. It is how much you will be missed if you don't show up every day. So your job really is to make yourself worth as much as possible by being a valuable contributor to the team, and then they can't live without you. So that's step number 1, is figure out what you're worth. Because if you honestly go in and ask for a raise and they're like, well, we were actually thinking of cutting your position, that's not going to go very well for you. So you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to be a valuable contributing team member. And the more skills you have that nobody else has on your team, the better. It's harder to replace you. The second step is you have to set the stage. And so what I mean by that is 3 to 6 months before your performance review, you need to reach out to your boss. Email is generally perfect for this, and say, hey, I know my performance review is coming up in 3 months. I want to just touch base with you and get some feedback. How do you think I'm doing? How is my performance right now? If you had to say, is there anything you would like to see me doing better that I'm not doing? Because I want to make sure I'm being a valuable contributor to the team. And I want to make sure that there isn't anything I could be doing better. So you're setting the stage, right? You're letting them know that you're getting ready to walk into that room and get really good feedback on yourself. A lot of bosses have a hard time giving you feedback if you don't specifically ask for it. So you want to ask for it. I remember one time I went to my boss, Dr. Dan. I'm like, Dr. Dan, I'm ready for a raise. He's like, well, you haven't been doing that great the last 3 months. I'm like, what? And it was true. I was going through a divorce. I was a hot mess. I thought I was handling everything just fine. Apparently I wasn't.
Oh, no.
And I know. And he's like, no, you don't get a raise. You're not even doing your basic job well. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, I needed to hear this.
Why did you wait 3 months to tell me this?
Exactly. So I got some awareness. I turned my ship around and I told him I'll be back in 3 months to discuss my raise. And I worked on my things and got my raise, but you don't want to walk into that like I did. Step 3 is you have to time it right. So when it comes time for your performance review, where you're going to ask for your raise, you want to make sure when your boss is at the peak performance hour. That's probably not Friday at 5 o'clock. If they get a big emergency or a screaming client come in right before your time, reschedule, get to know when your boss seems happiest and try to book that slot with them so they're in peak condition. And then what you want to do is you want to send a pre-performance review email to them. And this is maybe a week or 2 prior, and say, I'm really looking forward to my performance review with you. And I do intend to discuss my salary. And for your convenience, here is what my historical raises have been. And I will be discussing, if you feel comfortable saying it, I'm going to be seeking a $2 hour, $5 hour, whatever more vacation, whatever your thing is you're seeking, go ahead and set the stage and put it in there, because you don't want to spring this stuff on your boss. They won't be in the right mindset to know how to answer it. I honestly, as a boss, could not tell you when everyone's last raises were. So I always loved it when they list the raises out and I could see exactly how much you have been making over your time with me. Number 4 is like, you're in the actual performance review. You're in the room with your boss and it's time to ask for the raise. You have to say the words. And I usually will preface it with, because of these 3 things I've done, 1, 2, 3, name them out. I have grown the revenue X%. I have seen all these emergency cases on the weekend. Whatever you've done, I've helped train some of the new employees. Just list 3. You don't want to be obnoxious. I would like to ask for a raise of X dollars, and I'd like to see what you think about that. And then just shut up, right? It'll get uncomfortable, but the ball is in their court, in their thinking, and you don't want to ruin it by rambling on and on. So just button up and sit there. And the next
one of those moments where the person who talks first loses.
Yeah, exactly. Because what they're going to come back with is one of 3 things. They're either say, yes, I can do that. That works for us. Or it'll be, no, unfortunately, we can't do that. Or it'll be the last one, which is maybe we can meet in the middle. So if you get the raise, before you run off on your shopping spree, you want to make sure you actually write a thank you note to your boss. And I'm a fan of a real hard copy note, not an email. And you want to leave it on their desk the next day, thanking them for recognizing your contributions and giving you the requested raise. We're trying to butter them up because we intend to do this again next year. And if they say no, then you need to say, well, what's it going to take for me to get that? And maybe they'll say, that is such a high number, we could never do that. Well, then maybe you're in the wrong place. Maybe this isn't the career for you. This isn't going to gel with your big personal number that you're pursuing. Or maybe you get the other result, which is we'll meet you halfway. And I get that one. We'll meet you halfway, but don't give up. Say, well, can we meet again in 3 months so I can maybe try to close the gap more? You're just showing you're not aggressive, but that you're advocating for yourself. You're paying attention to these things and you're working hard to make more. And yeah, those are basically the steps.
I love it. I love it. And I think it also ties back to what we talked about before of saying, that understanding the economics of the business that you're in, of the practice that you're in, as most of us will experience, and how those economics work. Because, certainly if you're in, a small rural 2-doctor practice, the raise that you can ask for that practice can provide is going to look a lot different than if you're, in a big city where, prices are high to begin with and there's a lot more revenue going on. Of course, there's a lot more costs sometimes associated there. But understanding, kind of like we talked about price setting and the revenue in it that's coming in, the costs that are going out, and how that applies to you and what is a reasonable range for, your position to take home really helps walk in and keep you on the same page as the person you're talking to. Like you said, go in and say, I've raised the revenue X amount, and because of that, I think that I should take home Y. And when you can back it up with real numbers and show that you kind of understand the economics that you're dealing with, I think it gives you a really powerful case.
For sure. You get a lot more respect in the room. And, to me, the worst thing is when you're working really hard and you want to make more money and you're hoping and wishing you will make more money, but you don't have a conversation with the management as to what that trajectory looks like. You can just get screwed over so bad, and you get mad and you get angry and you internalize it. And then you start thinking, this place sucks and why am I here? They don't appreciate me. And really what might be happening is you're mismatched. You might be a technician, and I mean, I'm the first one to say all technicians should be paid a minimum of $75 an hour. Is that realistic with where you're at? You have to find out, because you have to decide what's your number, what do I want, what do I need to live and grow my egg nest, and then you get to decide if you're in the right place or not. And your boss might be like, there's no way we will ever be able to pay somebody that amount of money. Well, isn't that good to know? So you stop asking and you stop being upset when you don't get it, and instead you understand the playing field.
One other thing I'm just curious your thoughts on with regard to that discussion is, and I'm in total agreement with you as far as, making sure that we're paying people more, and, it's kind of a universal thing in the veterinary industry. But with the way things sit right now, in many cases, certainly not every scenario, sometimes if we're doing these big raises, like those costs are getting passed on to pet owners. And then those conversations that we talked about in the exam rooms earlier get even tougher. And, that can have an impact on morale. So I'm curious, like, am I selling myself and other people short here to say, like, well, we have to be realistic because I don't want to, I'm only willing to pass a certain amount on to pet owners in the current climate we're in right now. What's your thought on kind of having that mentality?
Okay, I have two thoughts on this, and they may not be popular, but I'm going to say them.
That's why I ask. I want to know.
The first one is, I feel like the practices, and this is kind of ironic coming from someone who started a technology company, but I feel like veterinary medicine has adopted so much technology and so much innovation and assumed that our clients wanted this, and we passed the cost along. And now we've got fees that are so high that we've outpriced ourselves, and we can make ourselves feel better all day long about the benefits of, say, the latest and greatest digital x-ray machine. But at the end of the day, if our client can't pay for that, what have we really accomplished? And I think we need to give solid interrogation to the new things we're adding at our practice, and not assume that we can just bring them on and pass the costs on. Because the real magic of the practice is the humans inside there with their brains and their ability to care and hold scalpel blades and set IV catheters and stuff like that. And so we're innovating at the expense of paying our own people, and all thinking we can make it all work by just passing the cost to the pet owner, which is now astronomical for many people, including myself. I have to take my own dog to the vet now, and I'm blown away at how expensive it is. Okay. My other one, which will be probably less popular than that one, is the influx of corporate acquisition into our field has set the stage for a margin that is making somebody else a lot of money and not infusing it back to the people on the front lines. And so when we're running practices at 20, 23% EBITDA, where is the money going? Because maybe what needs to happen is the corporate groups and the owners of the clinics need to be more realistic and have a 10 to 12% EBITDA instead of pushing for the higher EBITDAs, which satisfy the VCs, which satisfy the outsider investors that are coming in. And the people that are paying the price for this are us and the pet owners. And so what we're doing is we're asking our team members, because they're there because they love animals, right? Nobody becomes a vet or works in this field without loving animals. And so we're able to use that as a bartering piece to get you to do this job for less money.
Well, I hope everybody has another hour, because now we're going to dive into all of those because there's so much there. I'm so glad that I asked because I think you do have, some really insightful thoughts there. And, and mainly what I like about those thoughts is that I feel like this is not the right word, but like, it's not defeatist. It's not like, well, you're right. Like, we're probably as much as we can pass on to pet owners, so it is what it is. I think both of those thoughts offer, just forward thinking to say, well, hold on, like maybe there are some opportunities here where we can increase what we're paying people. And here's some ways that we can influence that. But thank you so much for your thoughts on all of that, because I think they are really insightful and like I said, forward thinking.
It's probably about time too for some restructuring or new innovation in the layout of the strata of the veterinary hospitals. I don't know about you, but when I graduated, there was always this ivory tower mentality for the university. If you want the big fancy things, you go to the ivory tower. Otherwise, we're all sort of like Dr. James Harriet out here doing the best we can. And now what seems to have happened in the last, 15, 20 years is that many of the GPs have become the ivory tower. And
we're like specializing amongst ourselves.
Yeah. And we're able to do it honestly because we can get an MRI in our clinic. We can learn ultrasound now. We can do all the sophisticated lab testing. All of these things are available to us. So we've kind of metamorphed into semi-ivory tower clinic. And now people are there that didn't ask us to do that and didn't know we were doing that. And they're wondering why it's so expensive. Does that make sense?
It does. I think I can see it from multiple perspectives because on the one hand, absolutely what you're saying. On the other hand, certainly, I think of a conversation I had with my sister who came on the podcast, she's a physician in human medicine. And we were talking about specialization because obviously that's very big in human medicine. And one of her thoughts was that, it is kind of natural to see this progression, this increase in specialization because the knowledge of medicine is increasing so rapidly and people are going to develop specific interests that they want to foster and get good at. And then it can be hard to kind of be that jack of all trades as the information is just continuing to grow and grow and grow and to be good at all those things. So certainly, understanding it's a natural thing to push a little bit more towards, like you said, this ivory tower, this specialization. And I think that does increase job satisfaction in some capacities to say, I'm really good at this thing and I don't have to do this other thing that I'm not good at and I don't enjoy.
Yeah, that's exactly. Mm-hmm. No, it's right. And listen, it's addictive to be able to deliver the best care possible to animals. It is so cool and so amazing because it fulfills our purpose. Our purpose is to help animals prevent suffering in them and to help them live their best life as long as possible. That's why we're here in this field. And so give me a tool that will help me do that better. I am all about it. But then I get to the other end of this and I see now I've outpriced myself. And it's kind of such a complicated situation. I feel like it's right before the innovation to put another strata of clinics in the market that are do the best you can, doc.
Sure.
Kind of that kind of clinic. And so people can have a choice in where they're going. Because if you think about it, not to get too literal, but if I like 5-star hotels and I end up at the Motel 6 accidentally, I'm upset. And if I like Motel 6 and I end up at the 5-star, I'm upset because I wasn't planning to spend all this money. And what we're doing right now is assuming all pet owners are 5-star oriented and they want them and have the means to pay for all the best for their pets. And it's causing a lot of mismatch relationships, frustrations, and people saying vets are so expensive. I can't afford to take my dog to the vet anymore. And they're losing trust and confidence in the profession.
And I think what I hear you saying here as well is like you talked about the choice and that there is a value in, say, maybe like a higher volume, low cost model or something similar because I know I've certainly had those conversations in different types of clinics. I've had the conversation of, what do you mean you can't do that here? Why don't you have the capability? And I've had the opposite conversation of, listen, like, I know you can do all these things. Like, I just need this. I just want, it's usually antibiotics. And you're like, no. Yeah. But to say, I like the way you put that, like another strata of clinics to give pet owners choices and not say, and I think we're seeing more of this discussion in veterinary medicine, like spectrum of care for what we can provide for that pet owner and that pet, and that there is value to all types of different clinic models, and they're all necessary, they're all important, and they all provide a service to a market that needs it.
Totally. And being really clear with with what your brand messaging is and what kind of player you are or clinic you are in the bigger spectrum, and letting everybody know that so they don't accidentally show up at the wrong place.
Sure. Oh my gosh. And then that's a whole conversation of drilling down to your why and, what you want to represent and all these different things. Stacey, I said we were going to have time to cover another one. We definitely are not, but I could go on forever about all, and finding your identity as a clinic and as a professional and what you want to provide and not having to be a jack of all trades and all these different things. But for the sake of time and being respectful of everybody's time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here only because I know we're just going to keep talking, which I would certainly enjoy. So I will say, can we do it again sometime and go over more of these points? Because there's so much gold here to talk about and to go over.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's set up another one and we'll go over the rest of the list. We'll probably do it faster because those two, I don't know, maybe we won't.
Maybe we won't. We'll get through as many as we get through the next time. But at least everybody, they have the 6 points here, so they know what they are, even though there's so much to expand on, as we've kind of shown here. And certainly, while you're all waiting anxiously for the next podcast episode with Stacey, because she has so many interesting things to talk about, also be sure to check out the webinar that is coming out in a couple of weeks, talking about the same sort of topics, and maybe we'll make it through all 6 on that one.
We will. That one is shorter. We don't get to dive in quite as deep. This one, I was excited, though, to share how to get a raise because I didn't get to do that in the webinar.
I'm so glad that we could talk about that here then, because I think that was such good advice. So, Stacey, thank you so much for joining me. Are there any final thoughts you want to share?
Ladies, let's just keep moving forward because we can become the 80% at the top if we want to. There's nothing holding us back, really. So we just got to stop sabotaging ourselves and get out there.
I love it. Well, until next time, thank you again.
Thank you.
Gosh, I wish we had the chance to dive into more of those points that Stacey was making, and I really truly hope we get to jump back into them on another episode. But I hope everybody enjoyed that talk and maybe took something valuable away from it. Dr. Santi, thank you so much for joining me. It was such a fun conversation. Of course, thank you to everyone who tuned into this episode. If you did enjoy this episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It'll help other veterinary professionals like you find this and other great content we try to put out there. For more episodes like this, click on the Education tab on the VetFolio website. As always, we'd love to hear your input on this talk, as well as ideas for topics you'd like to hear from us in the future. Feel free to reach out to me at dvm@vetfolio.com. You can also visit my Facebook page at Dr. Cassie DVM, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And remember, if one animal is better off because of you today, it's a great day.